Today, I would like to do a follow up video to the very first video I ever done as a podcaster. And my first video was a short history about Bud Wilkinson and how he came to OU. So today, I'm going to follow that up with Bud's time at OU. Plus, I'm going to discuss a very controversial game in 1959. But first, thank you for joining me at Sooner Legends Podcast. I'm your host, the legend Mike Wilkerson. And if you don't mind, could you please hit the like button? And if you're new to the channel, could you please subscribe? Turn on your post notification bell. That way you won't miss any OU related stuff that I post in the future. And also comment. Helps that it'll help push the algorithm of YouTube. So let's jump into old Bud, shall we? Now, like I stated in my first video, that Bud came here with Jim Tatum, and then Jim Tatum was fired after the 46th season. So in 47, Bud became the head coach of the University of Oklahoma. Now, in them early days of Bud's teams at Oklahoma, they were good for the simple fact that the players Bud had on his team were World War II vets. And I recall watching a documentary about Bud, and one of his players was talking about spring practice, and one of the defensive linemen that was lined up across from an offensive lineman wasn't blocking like he should, and Bud's assistant said, "Hey," his name was Bodenheimer, and he said, "Bodenheimer, get in there and block him." And he said he looked at that assistant coach and he said, "Man," he said, "that guy was in the Battle of the Bulge and he killed 20 Germans." So, but not only were they tough players, them World War II vets that Bud had, but they were highly disciplined. They knew how to take orders. So, in essence, it was kind of easy on Bud to coach them players because of their military training and their military discipline. And some of the players that Bud had on his team, you had Claude Arnold, uh, Darrell Royal. Uh, let's see, there was Tommy McDonald, Jim Weatherall, Jerry Tubbs, Max Boydston, Leon Heath. Uh, just that that team, the Burris brothers, Buddy Burris. I mean, there was just, that team was so loaded with talent it wasn't even funny. One of Bud's philosophies of what made him a good, an excellent head coach was he wasn't a screamer or a yeller. He never did cuss his players. Matter of fact, I heard one player state when they played Maryland, I think it was in the Orange Bowl, they were getting beat going into the halftime. And Bud looked at them in the locker room and said, "Y'all keep playing like this, they're going to beat the hell out of you. Now you get back out there and you play like Oklahoma should be playing." And he turned around, walked out, and of course Oklahoma won that game. And another philosophy that Bud brought to the program was he believed in one platoon football, meaning that both players, you played both sides of the ball. Bud didn't like two platoon football, which eventually they went to two platoon. But for Bud's early days, you played both sides of the ball. Jerry Tubbs, he was linebacker, but he was also center. I mean, but Bud felt that gave you better strength and conditioning being a player, which it makes sense. It really does to me. And of course, uh, I think it was in 55 or 56. I think it's 55. Bud implemented Team A and Team B, and Team A would go out, and then Team B would it it was about like rotating quarterbacks, but it was the whole line that he was rotating, and that's how they beat North Carolina in that first game because he was rotating lines in and out of the game. And but I heard Jay O'Neill say that after that game they were cramping up. Uh, he said the weather was about 100 degrees with 99% humidity. He said it was it, but that's how Bud. Uh, that was another one of his philosophies, and also one the biggest thing that Bud brought to the program was something he learned for legendary coach Don Farrow while they were coaching at Iowa pre-flight school was the split T. Now offense. Now essentially what the split T is, it's an option run 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 heavy offense. You got three men in the backfield and you got your normal offensive line. Well, before the NFL, not the NFL, the NCAA, before the rules changed, when the defenses would spread out, the offensive linemen would spread out with them, and that left on each side of center. That left a big gaping hole right there, and that split T offense, just, boy, it chewed a lot of players up, a lot of yards on that. So, like I said, and Bud, he was just from what I've gathered listening to his players, that he was one of them coaches that just you love to be around, you love to come to practice. He made it was hard, but it was a lot of fun. Bud was a no nonsense coach. Don't take that for granted. He required a lot of discipline and a lot of fortitude to play for him. And so and also another thing about Bud is at the time he was head coach, and we're going to talk the early 50s in this one. What made another thing that made Bud so famous, if you remember right, there was a Broadway play that came out from Rodgers and Hammerstein called Oklahoma. And also, Mickey Mantle played for the New York Yankees baseball team. So everybody was captivated with the state of Oklahoma, and that even drew a larger audience to Bud's popularity, which I think is pretty cool. And also, Kurt Gowdy, being the Yankees uh, radio announcer, he announced two seasons for Bud in his early years in 47 and 48. So that grew the popularity of Bud Wilkinson and Oklahoma football, and also our dominance in the late 40s and 50s. My gosh, that to me, in my opinion, Bud set the gold standard in all of college football for how to build a dynasty at a particular college. And let's see, Bud, like I said, he became head coach of Oklahoma in 1947 after one season as an assistant to Jim Tatum, who went on to coach the University of Maryland. In Bud's first season, he led the Sooners to a 7-2-1 record and a share of the Big Six conference championship. And that was the first of 13 consecutive Big Six, Big Seven, and Big Eight conference titles. Also, Bud won the national championship in 50, 55, and 56, and he amassed an overall 145, 29, and 4 record, which has been since been beat by Barry Switzer and Bob Stoops. But Bud was he, he was the man. I don't care what anybody said. And one thing that everybody, I don't care if you're an Oklahoma fan or not an Oklahoma fan, one thing that Bud Wilkinson and the University of Oklahoma owns is the 47 game win streak from 1953 to 57, and that record still stands. Now here's something that a lot of people don't know. You might know, but a lot of people probably don't. Earlier in Bud's head coaching career, his Sooners reeled off a 31 consecutive game win streak from 1948 to 1950. And apart from two losses in 51, Bud Sooners did not lose more than one game per season for 11 years between 48 and 58, going 107, 8 and 2 over that period. Bud's teams also went 12 consecutive seasons from 47 to 58 without a loss in conference play, and that streak hasn't been seriously threatened. And Bud, he never did suffer a conference loss until 59 when we lost to Nebraska. And Bud's only losing season was in 1960, but that season he still surpassed Benny Owens as the all-time winningest coach at Oklahoma, in Sooner history for that matter. And also another little tidbit about Bud is, if y'all remember in the 50s, in the middle 50s, we'll talk about the 55, 56, 57 era, TV was in its infancy. And Bud capitalized that, gaining another stature of his popularity by becoming the first coach in all of football to host his own weekly coaching show. And I've seen a bunch of them old clips. He had a board that had had the hash marks and the yard lines marked out, and he had these little figures called the little men. And when he would describe a play, like for example the Statue of Liberty, he'd set up his little men, bring them back like they're supposed to be, and he'd show how that play developed. And also another thing about Bud, while President Kennedy was president, Bud served under President Kennedy as counsel on physical fitness. And Bud wrote all the procedures, all the formats, for lack of a better term, for schools all over the country on on exercises and stuff like that for the PE programs around the nation. And also, I've heard Bob Berry state that the day that President Kennedy was assassinated, uh, Bud and Bob Berry Sr. were on their way. They were playing Nebraska. And Bob said it was very just melancholy. And when they get to Lincoln, Bud was thinking about canceling the game due to the assassination. Bud calls Bobby Kennedy, Jack Kennedy's little brother, and Bobby told him to still play the game. But yeah, Bud was very involved with the Kennedys. Uh, him and President Kennedy knew each other personally, and as a matter of fact, a funny story I seen is President Kennedy in one of OU's games came in the locker room to see how his physical fitness education was going under his man Bud Wilkinson. Well, there was a guy from in there that kind of had a big belly, and jokingly, President Kennedy went over to him and poked him in the belly and says, "What about this one, Bud?" so, so one thing OU was never short of during Bud's tenure was good, solid, quality players. I mean, I mentioned some at the first of this video, and they were just, all of them, just very, very remarkable. Now, I'm going to talk to you about a very controversial game in 1959 while Bud was coach. And we went to Northwestern. And from the way I look at it, it's in the Chicago area. And y'all know Chicago. That's where Al Capone was. A lot of gangsters, sports bookies, etc. OU arrives to play Northwestern. They arrived early for some reason on a Wednesday. Well, that Thursday, they go to a restaurant. They're just right down the street from the hotel. Now, up to that point, OU was highly favored in that game. Now, according to what I read, the Thursday that they went to their dinner, the line flipped and Northwestern was favored about an hour before they went for their team meal. The team eats their meal, and a lot of them eat the fruit salad. And from what I read, after they ate the fruit salad, it wasn't 10, 15 minutes later. I'm not going to describe it, but let's just say they got very, very sick and got food poisoning. And a lot of them had to go to the hospital to get their stomachs pumped. There were reports of OU players laying on the sidewalk in the fetal position, waiting for their taxis to get there. Long story short, they get their stomachs pumped, and they still have to play the game on that Saturday in a monsoon, and OU gets throttled by 32 points in that game. Now, according to what I read, there was a lot of stuff swept under the carpet when that got investigated. My personal opinion and what I feel about that game is that the sports bookies rookie dude Oklahoma into losing that game, because you don't just eat fruit salad and boom, you get sick. I don't believe in coincidences. Never have, never will. I've heard my daddy tell that story many times. So you form your own opinion. But I just thought I'd touch base on that. Well, as always, I thank y'all for pulling up today. This is the old legend. This video has been brought to you by Devil Dogs Brew and Beans, a veteran-owned coffee company, and he is my sponsor. And I've got a link directly in the description below. If you use the promo code Sooner Legends at checkout, you will receive free shipping in the continental United States. So for today, we thank y'all for pulling up. And don't forget, on your way out, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe and turn on your post notification bell. This is Sooner Legend. We'll see you on the backside. God bless y'all.